The chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with the cold light of 1,000 holographic displays, each one representing a species that had earned its place among the stars. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood alone at the human delegation's podium, his dress uniform crisp despite the sweat gathering beneath his collar. 53 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair, he had spent 3 decades preparing humanity for this moment. The moment when Earth would finally be recognized as a full member of galactic civilization. The Valanthi High Speaker, a being of luminescent blue skin and 4 gracefully articulated arms, rose from its elevated position at the center of the council amphitheater. Its voice carried the weight of 15,000 years of unbroken civilization when it spoke. The council has deliberated on humanity's petition for full membership status, the High Speaker announced, its translator rendering the words in perfect English. After extensive review of your species' history, technological development, and cultural practices, we have reached a unanimous decision. Daniel felt his heart quicken. 40 years of diplomatic missions, scientific exchanges, and cultural programs had led to this single moment. Earth had proven itself. They had cured diseases that had plagued council worlds for millennia. Human engineers had developed faster-than-light communication systems that even the ancient Valanthi had adopted. Human artists had created works that moved beings who communicated through pheromones and beings who perceived time in non-linear ways alike. Humanity's petition is denied, the High Speaker said. The words didn't register at first. Daniel stood frozen, certain he had misheard. Around him, the holographic representations of 312 member species flickered with what might have been satisfaction, or perhaps mere indifference. "I don't understand," Daniel managed, his diplomatic training barely holding his voice steady. "Our contributions to galactic science, our cultural exchanges, the treaties we've honored without exception for 4 decades, are acknowledged and appreciated," the High Speaker interrupted with what Daniel had learned to recognize as Valanthi condescension. "However, the Council has determined that humanity lacks the prerequisite stability for full membership. Your species' history of internal conflict, your propensity for violence, and your troubling tendency toward what you call ambition make you unsuitable for participation in galactic governance." "Every species has a history of conflict," Daniel argued. "The Mordex wiped out 3 sentient species before achieving space flight. The Crystalline Collective absorbed 17 civilizations into their hive mind, yet both hold permanent seats on this council." The High Speaker's 4 arms moved in a gesture Daniel had never seen before, something between dismissal and pity. "Those events occurred before the establishment of the council. The rules are clear. No species with documented warfare within the last 5,000 years may hold membership status." 5,000 years, Daniel's composure cracked. "Humanity has only had writing for 6,000 years. You're judging us by a standard we cannot possibly meet." "The standard exists for good reason," a new voice interjected. The Mordex representative, a creature of chitinous plates and compound eyes, leaned forward from its position. "Young species are dangerous, unpredictable. Your kind has proven this repeatedly. 3 of your nation-states possess weapons capable of rendering your homeworld uninhabitable. You call this civilization. We call it deterrence," Daniel said quietly. "A concept born from the same conflict you condemn us for. We learned. We adapted. We have not used those weapons in over a century." "A century," the Mordex representative chittered with what might have been laughter. "We have been peaceful for longer than your species has existed. Come back in 5,000 years, human. Perhaps then you will have proven your worth." Daniel looked around the chamber one final time, meeting the gaze of beings who saw humanity as nothing more than violent children playing at civilization. He had spent his entire career believing that if humanity just worked hard enough, proved itself thoroughly enough, it would earn its place among the stars. He had been wrong. "The Council's decision is final," the High Speaker declared. "Humanity may retain its associate status and continue trading within designated zones. However, expansion beyond your current territorial boundaries is prohibited, and all human vessels are hereby restricted from Council core systems. This session is concluded." The holographic displays winked out one by one. Daniel stood alone in the suddenly dark chamber, the weight of 8 billion human hopes pressing down on his shoulders. When he finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "So be it." The news spread across Earth like wildfire. Riots erupted in 17 major cities before the first day was out. The world governments that had united under the banner of the Earth Coalition found themselves facing a population that had been promised the stars and told they couldn't have them. Admiral Catherine Price watched the chaos unfold from her office aboard the orbital station Prometheus, humanity's first and largest space-based military installation. At 61, she had commanded vessels that pushed the boundaries of human-occupied space for 35 years. She had seen wonders that most humans could only dream of, and she had buried friends who had died exploring those wonders. Now she watched her species tear itself apart over a rejection that, in her opinion, should have been expected all along. "They never intended to accept us," she said to the man standing beside her. Commander Paul Bennett, her chief of operations, nodded slowly. "The requirements for membership were written long before humanity discovered fire. They're not standards to be met, they're walls designed to keep newcomers out." "The question is," Paul said, "what do we do now?" Catherine turned from the viewport. Her eyes held a determination that had been forged in the vacuum of space and tempered by decades of watching humanity beg for scraps from the galactic table. "The Council told us we can't expand beyond our current boundaries," she said. "They restricted us from their precious core systems, but they said nothing about the outer rim." Paul frowned. "The outer rim is a wasteland, Admiral. Barren systems, unstable stars, and what the Council calls undesirable elements. There's a reason no member species has claimed it." "Exactly," Catherine said, and smiled. "There's no rule against claiming territory no one else wants, and human history has shown that we have a particular talent for turning wastelands into gardens." The Outer Rim Initiative launched 6 months after the Council's rejection. While Earth's politicians argued about diplomatic responses and formal protests, Catherine Price and a coalition of military leaders, scientists, and industrialists simply began building. Dr. Laura Mitchell led the first scientific expedition to the Outer Rim aboard the survey vessel Pathfinder. At 38, she was already considered one of humanity's foremost experts in xenogeology, having studied alien mineral formations across dozens of worlds during her career. The Council had allowed humans limited access to certain systems for scientific purposes, a concession that Laura had exploited mercilessly. Now she stood on the bridge of a ship heading into truly unknown territory, watching as the Pathfinder emerged from faster-than-light travel into a system that no Council species had ever bothered to survey. "Initial scans complete," her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Green, reported. 7 planets, 1 potentially habitable. "And Doctor, you're going to want to see the asteroid belt readings." Laura crossed to the sensor station and felt her breath catch. The asteroid belt was rich, impossibly rich, in minerals that the Council species considered rare and precious. Enough raw material to build a fleet, enough wealth to fund an empire. "Why would they leave this unclaimed?" Marcus asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Laura studied the data for a long moment before answering. "Because they don't need it," she said finally. "The Council species have had thousands of years to accumulate resources. They've optimized their territories, established stable supply chains, and stopped expanding because they have everything they need. Why risk the unknown when you're already comfortable?" "But we're not comfortable," Marcus said slowly, understanding dawning. "No," Laura agreed, already calculating the potential yields. "We're hungry, and the Outer Rim is a feast." Within 2 years, humanity had established 17 mining operations, 4 research stations, and 3 colony worlds in the Outer Rim. The work was dangerous: unstable gravity wells, radiation storms, and exotic hazards that no species had ever documented claimed lives on a regular basis. But humans kept coming. Benjamin Torres was one of them. 24 years old, he had grown up in the slums of what used to be Mexico City, watching the wealthy elite celebrate humanity's impending acceptance into galactic society while he struggled to find clean water. When the rejection came, Ben had felt nothing but vindication. The stars had never been meant for people like him anyway. Then he had seen the recruitment advertisements for the Outer Rim Initiative. Free transport, guaranteed employment, and the promise of a new start on a new world. The catch: the work was hard, the conditions harsh, and the survival rate was not something they mentioned in the promotional materials. Ben signed up the next day. Now he stood on the surface of Haven, the first true human colony in the Outer Rim, watching the sunset paint the alien sky in shades of purple and gold. The air was thin, Haven's atmosphere was still being processed, and the temperature fluctuated wildly between day and night, but it was his. For the first time in his life, Benjamin Tor's own land, 100 hectares of rocky soil that he would spend the next decade transforming into farmland. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside him. He turned to find Dr. Michelle Santos, the colony's chief agricultural scientist, standing nearby. At 45, she had left a prestigious position at the Earth Coalition's Food Research Division to come to Haven and try something impossible, growing crops in soil that had never known life. "It doesn't look like much," Ben admitted. "But it's mine," Michelle smiled. "That's what they said about the American frontier, and the Australian outback, and the Martian colonies. Every time humanity finds new territory, we hear the same thing: it's barren, it's hostile, it'll never support life." She gestured at the greenhouse domes in the distance, already glowing with the promise of fresh vegetables. "And every time we prove them wrong." "The council species don't seem worried about us," Ben said. "I heard they're calling this whole initiative a tantrum, a waste of resources." "Let them think that," Michelle replied. "By the time they realize what we're building out here, it'll be too late to stop us." 5 years after the rejection, humanity's Outer Rim territories had grown from a few struggling outposts to a network of 47 inhabited worlds and over 200 industrial installations. The population had swelled to nearly 300 million, people drawn by opportunity, adventure, or simply the desire to be part of something new. The council began to take notice. "This is unacceptable," the Mordex representative declared at an emergency session. The humans were restricted from expansion. Their flagrant violation of council directives must be addressed. The Valanthi High Speaker's voice carried a note of concern that hadn't been present 5 years ago. "The humans have not technically violated any restriction. The Outer Rim has never been council territory. Our jurisdiction does not extend there." "Then extend it," the Mordex demanded. "Claim those systems." "The humans cannot be allowed to build an independent power base beyond our control." "On what grounds?" another voice asked. The representative of the Singing Ones, a species that communicated through complex harmonic frequencies, had rarely spoken in council sessions. "We declared those territories worthless for millennia. We cannot simply claim them now because another species has found value in them." "We can and we must," the Mordex insisted. "The humans are aggressive, ambitious, and dangerously inventive. If they are allowed to continue unchecked, they will become a threat to galactic stability." The High Speaker turned to face the Mordex representative directly. "You speak of aggression, representative. Yet in 5 years of expansion, humanity has not engaged in a single military action. They have fought no wars, claimed no inhabited territory, harmed no other species. Can the same be said of the Mordex during your expansion period?" A long silence followed. Everyone in the chamber knew the answer to that question. "The council will continue to monitor the situation," the High Speaker finally declared. "No action will be taken at this time. However, humanity is hereby formally notified that any aggression toward council member species will be met with unified response." Admiral Catherine Price received the notification with something approaching amusement. She had moved her headquarters to a space station orbiting Haven, overseeing the construction of what was rapidly becoming humanity's first true deep space fleet. "They're scared," she observed to her assembled commanders. "For the first time in their long, comfortable existence, they're looking at a species that doesn't need them." Captain Richard Blake, commander of the carrier vessel Endeavour, Study the tactical displays. Our fleet strength is growing, but we're still significantly outmatched. If the Council decides to move against us militarily, they won't, Catherine interrupted. Not directly. The Council species have been at peace for so long that they've forgotten how to wage war. Their military forces are designed for peacekeeping and suppression, not conquest. More importantly, they've watched our history. They know what humanity is capable of when pushed. Then what will they do? Commander Angela Morrison asked. She led the intelligence division, a necessity that humanity had learned from its own turbulent history. Economic pressure, Catherine predicted, trade restrictions, sanctions. They'll try to starve us out, force us back into dependency on Council commerce. We've anticipated that, Paul Bennett reported from his position at the Strategic Planning Station. Our outer rim territories are nearly self-sufficient. Another 2 years and we won't need anything from Council space that we can't produce ourselves. Catherine nodded slowly. Then we have 2 years to make ourselves irreplaceable. Our scientists have made breakthroughs that Council species haven't achieved in millennia. Our engineers are designing ships that operate on principles their physicists declared impossible. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity can offer as partners, not as supplicants. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Samuel Grant, a theoretical physicist who had been considered eccentric even by the relaxed standards of the Outer Rim scientific community, had been working on a theory that every Council species had dismissed as impossible: instantaneous communication across any distance. The Council's fastest communication systems still relied on quantum entanglement relays, which required physical infrastructure and suffered from degradation over extreme distances. Samuel's theory suggested a different approach, one that exploited properties of space-time that Council physics had declared non-existent. They told me it was impossible, Samuel explained to the gathered representatives of the Outer Rim Colonial Authority, the governing body that had emerged to coordinate humanity's new territories. They said our mathematics were wrong, our understanding of physics primitive, our methodology flawed. So I stopped asking for their permission and started testing. He activated the device, a deceptively simple-looking apparatus that had taken 7 years and the resources of 3 colony worlds to build. A message was sent from Haven to a receiver at the edge of human space, 40,000 light-years away. The response came back in less than a second. The room erupted in cheers. Samuel Grant, disheveled and blinking in the sudden attention, had just made humanity the only species in known history to achieve truly instantaneous interstellar communication. Director Alina West, head of the Colonial Authority, understood the implications immediately. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "With this technology, our colonies can coordinate in real time, our fleets can respond to threats instantly, and the Council species will want it," Samuel finished. "They'll want it desperately, and we'll be the only ones who have it." News of humanity's communication breakthrough spread through the galaxy faster than the Council would have liked. The Outer Rim suddenly found itself receiving delegations from species that had never shown interest in human affairs before. The first to arrive were the Singing Ones. Their ambassador, a being whose name could only be approximated as a complex chord in E minor, met with Alina West in the colonial capital on Haven. "We have watched your species with great interest," the ambassador sang, their translator converting the harmonics into words. "The Council considers you dangerous because you do not fit their understanding of civilization. We consider you fascinating for the same reason." "You came for the communication technology," Alina said directly. "Why pretend otherwise?" The ambassador's harmonics shifted to something that might have been amusement. "Direct. Another trait the Council finds disturbing but we find refreshing. Yes, we desire your technology, but we also desire something more valuable: partnership." "Partnership." Alina raised an eyebrow. "The Singing Ones are a full Council member species. Why would you need partnership with humanity?" "Because the Council is stagnant," the ambassador replied, their tones dropping into something more serious. "We have been part of galactic civilization for 8,000 years, and in that time nothing has truly changed. The same species hold power, the same rules govern behavior, the same boundaries limit thought." Humanity represents something we have not seen in millennia: genuine change, genuine potential. Alina considered this for a long moment. What kind of partnership did you have in mind? The Outer Rim Alliance was announced 3 months later. Initially comprising humanity, the Singing Ones, and 2 other council species who had grown tired of galactic stagnation, it represented something unprecedented, an alternative to council membership. The founding ceremony took place on Haven, in the great plaza that had been built where Benjamin Torres had once watched his first Outer Rim sunset. Now the plaza was surrounded by buildings that reached toward the sky, monuments to human ambition and alien cooperation alike. Benjamin stood in the crowd, now a successful agricultural entrepreneur whose innovative farming techniques had helped feed 3 colony worlds. His wife, Dr. Lisa Morgan, a geneticist who had developed crop strains capable of growing in the most hostile environments, stood beside him with their daughter Clara in her arms. "She'll grow up in a different universe than we did," Lisa said quietly, watching as Alina West and the Singing One's ambassador signed the Alliance Charter. "A universe where humanity isn't begging for acceptance. A universe where we built our own place," Benjamin agreed. He looked at his daughter, barely a year old, already a citizen of something that hadn't existed when he was born. Whatever she becomes, she'll never have to feel like she doesn't belong. The Council's response was predictable but ultimately ineffective. Trade restrictions were implemented, but the Outer Rim Alliance had already established alternative supply chains. Diplomatic pressure was applied, but the species joining the alliance had calculated the risks and found them acceptable. 10 years after the rejection, the Outer Rim Alliance controlled territory equal in size to half the Council's space, not through conquest or aggression, but through exploration, colonization, and the simple human talent for making something from nothing. The Valanthi High Speaker requested a meeting. Admiral Catherine Price, now 71 and serving as the Alliance's military commander, accompanied Alina West to the summit on neutral ground, a space station at the boundary between Council and Alliance territory. The same Daniel Carter who had received humanity's rejection a decade ago served as the Alliance's chief negotiator. "The Council wishes to discuss the possibility of formal relations with the Outer Rim Alliance," the High Speaker began. The arrogance that had characterized their last meeting was noticeably absent. "Formal relations," Daniel repeated, "not membership. The Council recognizes that the Alliance operates under different principles," the High Speaker said carefully. "We are not proposing integration, but rather diplomatic and economic cooperation between our respective organizations." Catherine leaned forward. "Let me translate. You're worried. Our territory is growing while yours remains static. Our technology is advancing while yours stagnates. Our alliance is attracting species that should be loyal to you. You want to normalize relations before we become too powerful to negotiate with." The High Speaker's forearms moved in what might have been discomfort. "The Admiral's assessment is not inaccurate." Alina West spoke for the first time. 10 years ago, you told humanity that we were too violent, too ambitious, too dangerous to join galactic civilization. You set a standard you knew we could never meet. You expected us to accept your judgment and remain in our designated place. Instead, she continued, we went somewhere else. We built something new. And now you're sitting across from us asking for the same kind of cooperation you denied us. She paused, letting the irony settle. "We are not vindictive people, High Speaker. The Alliance welcomes diplomatic relations with the Council. But we will never again seek membership in an organization that judged us unworthy." "What do you want?" the High Speaker asked quietly. Daniel Carter smiled, the same man who had stood alone in a darkened chamber, bearing the weight of humanity's rejection. "We want what we've always wanted, the opportunity to prove what we're capable of. You thought you were casting us aside. Instead, you set us free." 20 years after the rejection, humanity had become something that no one, human or alien, had predicted. The Outer Rim, once dismissed as a wasteland, had transformed into the most dynamic region of known space. Human colonies dotted hundreds of worlds. Human ships explored reaches of the galaxy that had never been charted, and human science pushed the boundaries of what the universe was believed to allow. Dr. Laura Mitchell, now in her late 50s, led the expedition that made first contact with a species beyond the galaxy's edge, beings of pure energy who had observed galactic civilization for eons but never bothered to make contact because they found it uninteresting. They found humanity fascinating. Benjamin Torr's daughter Clara, now a young woman, commanded her own colonial survey ship. She had grown up hearing stories of a time when humanity had begged for acceptance, but those stories seemed as distant as ancient mythology. In her universe, humanity asked permission from no one. The Outer Rim Alliance had grown to include 37 species, some former council members, others newly spacefaring civilizations that humanity had helped achieve interstellar travel. The Alliance operated on principles that the Council had never considered: voluntary cooperation, merit-based advancement, and a willingness to take risks in pursuit of progress. Admiral Catherine Price passed away peacefully at the age of 81, surrounded by the officers she had trained and the fleet she had built. Her final words, recorded for posterity, became a rallying cry for generations of humans who followed. They told us we couldn't have the stars, so we took them anyway. 50 years after the rejection, a memorial was unveiled on Haven, a vast sculpture depicting a human hand reaching toward the stars, with the words of the original rejection carved into its base. Beneath the official council text, another inscription had been added: "Humanity's petition is denied." And below that, the human response: "We built our own throne." The Galactic Council still existed, still governed its ancient territories with the same rules it had followed for 15,000 years. But its influence had waned as more and more species chose the dynamism of the Alliance over the stability of the Council. The universe was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. The Valanthi High Speaker, the same being who had delivered the rejection half a century ago, visited the memorial on Haven. Standing before the sculpture, surrounded by a world that had transformed from barren rock to thriving civilization, they finally understood what they had unleashed. "We thought we were protecting galactic civilization from a dangerous species," they said to their escort, a human historian named Professor William Parker. "We believed that by denying humanity a place among us, we would contain your ambition, limit your growth, keep you manageable." And instead, Professor Parker asked. The High Speaker's forearms moved in a gesture that William had never seen before. Later, he would learn it signified profound regret. "Instead, we taught you that you didn't need us." The greatest mistake in the history of the Council was not accepting your petition. It was making you realize that our acceptance was never necessary in the first place. 75 years after the rejection, the unthinkable happened. The Council formally requested admission to the Outer Rim Alliance, not as equals, not as senior partners, but as applicants, hoping to join the organization that humanity had built from nothing. The irony was not lost on anyone. Chancellor Maria Santos, the granddaughter of Michelle Santos, who had grown the first crops on Haven, presided over the Alliance Assembly that would decide the Council's fate. At 52, she was young by the standards of galactic leadership, but she had inherited her grandmother's vision and her species' determination. 75 years ago, she addressed the Assembly, the Council told humanity that we were too violent, too ambitious, too dangerous for galactic civilization. They set impossible standards and expected us to accept their judgment. Instead, we went our own way. We built this alliance from nothing. We welcomed species that the Council had ignored or dismissed. We achieved what they said was impossible, again and again, until the impossible became routine. She paused, looking out at representatives from over 100 species, a gathering that would have been unimaginable to the humans who had received that original rejection. Now the Council comes to us. They want to join what they once dismissed. They want partnership with species they once looked down upon. And we must decide, do we treat them as they treated us? The Assembly chamber fell silent. Humanity's history is written in struggle, Maria continued. Every achievement, every advance, every step toward the stars was opposed by those who said it couldn't be done, shouldn't be done, would never be done. We succeeded not because we were stronger or smarter than our opponents, but because we refused to accept their limitations. She looked toward the council delegation, the Valanthi High Speaker among them. The council made a mistake 75 years ago. They underestimated us. They dismissed our potential. They tried to contain our ambition. And in doing so, they gave us the greatest gift we could have received, the knowledge that we didn't need them. Maria smiled, a smile that carried the weight of 3 generations of human achievement. But we are not them. We do not hold grudges across decades. We do not punish species for the mistakes of their ancestors. The alliance was built on the principle that every species, every civilization, every being has the potential to contribute something of value to the universe. She raised her hand in the traditional gesture of welcome. The Council's petition for alliance membership is accepted. Welcome to the future. 100 years after the rejection, a monument stood at the exact center of Alliance space. A massive structure visible from orbit, built from materials gathered from 1,000 worlds by 1,000 species working in cooperation, depicted the moment of humanity's rejection, a lone human figure standing before a vast array of alien beings, and the moment of humanity's triumph, that same figure joined by countless others of every species reaching toward an infinite field of stars. The inscription beneath read, "They told us we were too violent to be trusted, too ambitious to be controlled, too dangerous to be allowed. They cast us aside, expecting us to accept our place. Instead, we became the change the universe needed." The outer rim was not our exile. It was our beginning. And somewhere in the archives of the old Galactic Council, gathering dust in a forgotten database, the original rejection still existed, a reminder of a time when humanity had asked for permission to dream and been told no. The universe had learned since then that humanity didn't need permission. They never had. The end.